Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Actually, it's 10 minutes, so if Professor Cicconi thinks that talking about fluid challenges in 20 minutes is challenging, imagine talking about gender equity in 10. So I'll go right to the point. These are my disclosures, and this is the first thing I want to show you. I went online and decided to take the logo of a human, and this is what showed up. And I can imagine that every single one of you will recognize that as a man. And this is one of the main problems in gender equity. It's the way we speak about things. If you talk about anesthetists, doctors, or surgeons, you are, it's very difficult to distinguish between the profession in itself or the person that is doing the job. So there are many studies out there that show that if you have, if you ask someone, could you please tell me or name a very famous doctor, they will more likely name famous male doctors instead of famous female doctors. So this means that we women, although we are 50% of the world's population, we are on the line of being a variation of normality. And this is a problem because it also has some expression in the workplace. This is an iconic concept called the leaky pipeline. We know that women in science are less likely to progress in their career, are less likely to have leadership or academic positions, and they work through payrolls much slower compared to men. In medicine, this is exactly the same. So you have around 70% of women entering medical schools compared to around 10 to 18% of women in leadership roles in as professors in universities. The reasons for this are very broad. Marco and I have written some time ago a very theoretical paper on the reasons why this happens. If you have interest, I'm sure that he will provide you with this document, but I will, for the sake of time, will continue my talk. So what does the evidence show? Why is it really necessary to have women on board? I mean, why? Why do we have it? Why is it important to have a team with women? Well, the evidence shows, and if you look at countries like, or areas of the world like Scandinavia, you see that if there is diversity in decision making, there are evidence that the economies are stronger, that the governments are more stable. So more related to what we do in medicine, if you have teams of researchers that are more diverse, you are more likely to get successful publications and you get more citations in these publications. And to be a little bit provocative, there are some studies coming up showing that female cardiologists are more likely to make a correct diagnosis of a typical presentation of a myocardial infarct, which is traditionally happening more in women. So women actually, so with an impact on mortality on women's health. So diverse groups collaborate more effectively. Because there is a lack of evidence in anesthesiology, Marco and I and a group of other people decided to, just before the pandemic, release this survey, which was a worldwide survey. We had 148 countries on board with a very good percentage of women and male responders. And surprise, surprise. Women were more likely to be mistreated in the workplace. Being a woman was a disadvantage for a leadership or a research role. And on my personal level, something that we found important, women were less likely to have children so women anesthesiologists were less likely to have children compared to male anesthesiologists. But this, as I said, comes in line with a lot of research that we already know, both in anesthesiology and in other specialties. What was more important for us is to understand why. Why does this happen? So we asked you, probably some of you have replied to this survey. We asked you what is important, what would change? And the first thing that came up is that we have to start it in ourselves. We have to be role models in our workplace. So if you see something that is not correct, so if you see some sort of gender discrimination or any other sort of discrimination, speak up, report concerns, and be professional about it. Another aspect is there were a lot of people asking or recommending a lot of equity and equality measures at the workplace. It is obvious for me that people want equality measures, so they want equal pay, they want equal holidays, they want equal or shared time with their children once a child is born. But there were also a lot of equity measures that were that came about. And this probably, for some of you, this may sound crazy, but you know, adapting a roster to family commitments, so showing flexibility in the workplace, or allowing for part-time after childbirth, why not? And special working conditions during pregnancy. I mean, all of you who were pregnant or had a pregnant wife know that it's not the same. And supporting facilities at work, like having a laundry, or having a takeaway food system, or having a childcare at the workplace. These are all things that would make our lives much simpler. So if you go tomorrow back to your hospitals, there are three pillar changes that you can start doing straight away. First of all is raising awareness of the gender bias. The second one is have a zero policy towards gender bias, and this includes, for example, having a gender bias statement, or having a way that people can complain when they see some disparities going on, and having some sort of support towards women if they need it. And let's go through these quite rapidly. So raising awareness. Raising awareness is not evidence-based. It's the same principle as watching the news every evening. Information is power, and if you know what's going on around you, then you're more likely to make informed decisions. And this is also important for us women, because if people are informed, they are more likely to deconstruct this unconscious gender bias of having that person, the initial picture that I showed you, to be considered as a male instead of a female, for example. And it is very important because men are still in positions of leadership and decision, that these people, that we have a buy-in from males, so that we have male allies. And all of this is because of awareness. And I see a lot of people here that have some influence in publications. Publishing on gender equity is also a way of raising awareness, but it's very difficult, and for me particularly, it's very difficult to get a paper published in gender equity in an anesthesia journal, because it's considered social science, and social science is considered soft research. So there's also an issue there about unconscious gender bias. If we look at the zero policies, well, we had recently a paper, where hopefully will come up soon, and we checked how many countries in Europe have a gender policy or a gender equity statement in anesthesiology. And unfortunately, we have Italy leading the way with the UK, and then the Scandinavian countries doing their own gender policy statement. I would love if Slovenia would be soon in this map as well. So let's turn Slovenia red on the map. UK is actually one of the countries with the best, let's say, performance so far, because they even have a way to where you can complain. So they have a strict regulation to say, okay, if you have had a problem, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. So it's very clear. That's the only country in Europe where you can actually complain of a gender equity problem in a very structured way. And finally, supporting women. Well, this means, as we said before, structural changes in the workplace, or having mentorship programs specific for women, having advocacy initiatives. But for example, I brought you this example of what they did in the orchestras in the US. The big 5 orchestras in the US have started around 10 years ago to do what they call blinded selection processes. So instead of having a CV, people would just have to send a CD of how they played, and this increased the percentage of women in orchestras from 7 to 35%, just by blinding. So Does Slovenia does this? Well, I'm happy to see that they do. Slovenia has, at least in this Congress, they have an equal percentage of women speakers and male speakers, panelists. The organizing committee is actually quite diverse as well. So is the scientific committee and the workshop facilitators. So bravo. And so from now on, concluding, 3 issues. Please go back home and increase and raise awareness of the gender gap topic in your workplace. Identify all the factors in your place that discourage women and ethical minorities to progress on their careers, and tackle these issues very specifically gender neutral and goal oriented, so that women can further succeed in their profession and in their leadership. Thank you.